to be back in the Gospel of Mark this morning. We're going to be in chapter 3. And the last thing that has occurred is there's some really angry people. In chapter 3, verse 6, we see that the Pharisees are plotting and planning with the Herodians, trying to find a way to have Jesus, quote, destroyed. They want to get rid of him. They see him as a threat to them. They see him as a heretic. Sadly, it seems more than likely some of them, if not most of them, knew that he probably was the Messiah. They just didn't want him because it was challenging what they wanted to have happen. It was challenging what they desired to have. And so instead of embracing him, they wanted to kill him. And so you have Mark chapter 3, and we're going to start in verse 7 this morning. Verse 7. But Jesus withdrew himself with his disciples to the sea. In light of the fact that they're planning to kill him, he leaves the area that he was in. And a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea, and from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and from beyond Jordan, and they about Tyre and Sidon. A great multitude, when they had heard what great things he did, and came unto him. And so literally, if you were to look at a map, they're coming from basically all directions. The north, the south, the east, the west. And they're not just like nearby. Some of them are like great distances away. They're traveling really long distances. So I'm not sure the time frame of all this. But as we mentioned before, he's kind of doing ministry over by the seaside because he can't really do it in town anymore. And crowds are just coming from word of mouth. Like, this guy's a miracle worker. Like, people are being healed. They just touch him and he is healed. And so that's what they're kind of amazed at with that in these large crowds. I have to say, so there's a TV show about Jesus' life that's ongoing called The Chosen, and season 3 hasn't come out yet. They had season 2. It has some good stuff about it. They take too many liberties for my personal taste. I get it. They're trying to add some more fluff to the story. But one of the things that they did is for the Sermon on the Mount, which isn't recorded here, but this is getting close to when it happened. In the show, they have the disciples making posters and handing out posters to let them know that Jesus is going to be teaching a Sermon on the Mount, and they need to go there. And that's how the crowd formed. That's not what happened. Okay. And they also built like a platform for him with a large curtain and stuff. Like he was like some celebrity pastor, This big, like, guys, this is not what this is. I get it. It's your take on it, but it's not even close to what happened. It's just word of mouth. It wasn't posters. And most people weren't coming to hear a sermon. They were coming because they wanted to be healed. That's why they were coming, not to hear a sermon. There was no platform. And in fact, I'm getting ahead of myself here. In fact, he gets up into the mountain to get away from people. He wasn't inviting, he called a small group there. And then a group comes to hear him and to be healed. And after he heals a bunch of people, he then leaves that large group and teaches his smaller group of disciples, which is referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. So he didn't preach to this massive crowd of people that's coming from all over. He talked to a smaller group of people up in the mountain away from them, and he wasn't throwing a large event, is what I'm saying. Anyway, just a pet peeve of mine. Not what happened. It's this word of mouth. They're traveling from all these other towns to come see if they can get a healing from him. Verse 9. And he spake to his disciples, and a small ship should wait on him. He spake to his disciples that a small ship should wait on him because of the multitude, lest they should throng him. For he had healed many, insomuch that they pressed upon him for to touch him, as many as had plagues. So check this out. This is crazy. Some say that there's thousands of people, maybe even tens of thousands of people. It's kind of hard to say how many, but the crowd, basically everybody wants to touch Jesus. He's one person, and there's thousands of people there that all want to touch this one person. Like, this is crazy, out-of-hand thing going on. This is not a planned event. This is chaotic. It's kind of mob-like, and Jesus looks at his disciples and says, can you get a getaway boat ready? Like, they have a boat ready for him to make a quick getaway just in case it gets unsafe for him and the group. Because people are basically trampling over each other to touch Jesus. And so this is turning south really fast. Once again, sorry, not to pick on this Chosen TV show. They also had this idea that people were forming a nice line and one at a time coming to see Jesus. That's not what happened either. It's a madhouse. Everyone's trying to reach and touch him, is what's going on here. So much that he's like, do you have the getaway car ready? Excuse me, the boat? We got to make a quick exit. This is getting crazy. So that's the type of crowd that this is. Verse 11, and unclean spirits, when they saw him, fell down before him and cried, saying, thou art the Son of God. And he straightly charged them that they should not make him known. This is the second time we've seen this, where the demons are like, wait, we know who you are. It's not time for you to kill us yet or destroy us yet. Is it like you're here early, aren't you? Like, they're kind of like worried about the whole thing. And he's just like, just shut up. I don't need to hear this from you right now. And then verse 13. So this crazy event happens. All these people coming from all over, thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people. And it's a crazy mob type scene where they're all trying to get a touch of him. And at some point, Jesus leaves that situation. I don't know if it was on the getaway boat. I don't know if they got the crowd calmed down. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly what happened in that moment, but he leaves at some point and goes up into a mountain. And if you look at the parallel passage in Luke chapter 6, you'll see that Jesus went to the mountain to pray. So he goes by himself. This is the second time we've seen this too in Mark. This is the second time we've seen a large group of people looking for healing and Jesus going to the mountain to pray. And so this is the second time Jesus gets alone to spend time with the Father in silence and solitude by himself, and the second time that he prays all night. So he goes up to a mountain, prays all night, and calleth unto him whom he would that they came unto him. And he ordained 12 that they should be with him, and that he might send them forth to preach, and to have power to heal sicknesses, and to cast out devils. And Simon he surnamed Peter, and James the son of Zebedee, and John the brother of James, and he surnamed them a weird name that I can't pronounce, and it sounds funny every time I try saying it, which is the sons of thunder. And Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew and Matthew and Thomas and James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus and Simon the Canaanite, or, if you will, the zealot, and Judas Iscariot, which also betrayed him. And they went into an house, and the multitude cometh together again, so that they could not so much as eat bread. So once again, out of this larger group of disciples, we're not sure what that number is, he calls the 12, and then Jesus and the 12 at some point try to have this meal together at a house, and the mob follows them there. The group follows them there. He can't even just sit down with his disciples, his intimate apostles, to have this conversation. He gets attacked again. We're like, oh, let's just touch his garment. Let's get to him, you know. Like we're just trying to eat. Like couldn't even sit down and have a meal. This is how large his popularity is in regards to trying of people knowing that he can heal people and that there can be healing from him. So that's the text we're looking at today. I think there is an important truth for us to learn from this text. So, this crowd, I'm going to take my jacket off because now I'm getting warm. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. So this crowd, this initial crowd that shows up, this mob-like crowd that's just trying to be able to touch Jesus. You have probably mostly Jews, also Gentiles in this group. But that aside, what you have is some people that are really interested in a miracle, but maybe aren't so interested in Jesus himself. He's just someone to get a miracle from. They're not necessarily interested in his message or his mission. He just has a miracle for them. And I'm not just saying that. Jesus addresses this issue. In fact, a little bit later when you have the feeding of the 5,000, they cross over the sea. A group follows them over there, and we're basically like, is there more food? And this is what Jesus said to them. I'm going to read John chapter 6. This is a reference to after feeding the 5,000. They follow him over, and they're like, man, we're looking for more food, basically. In John chapter 6, verse 26, it says, Jesus answered them and said, verily, verily, I say unto you, ye seek me, not because ye saw the miracles, but because ye did eat of the loaves and were filled. Labor not for the meat which perisheth, but for that meat which endureth unto everlasting life, which the Son of Man shall give unto you. For him hath God the Father sealed. Then said they unto him, what shall we do that we might work the works of God? Jesus answered and said unto them, this is the work of God, that ye believe on him whom he hath sent. So they come over and they come across as if they actually really care about Jesus, but they don't. They actually just want to know more about the miracle stuff. But Jesus points out, is like, but you're not even amazed about the miracle. Because if you were actually excited about the miracle, you'd understand this miracle is authenticating me. You would realize that this moment in history is significant. But all you notice is that, hey, there's more food. They're not amazed by Jesus. They're amazed at the food. He's like, no. And they're like, well, can we do that too? Can you tell us how to multiply bread? And he's like, no. The work that you need is to believe on me. What you need to do is believe. See, they didn't want to believe him. They didn't want to be with him. They didn't want to follow him on the mission. They disliked the outcome of him being around, but they didn't actually want him or his mission. And he calls them out on it. In fact, if you read on, we're not going to do it this morning, but if you read on in this chapter, they keep pushing back on him. And Jesus is so straightforward that his mission and message is about people repenting and believing on him and embracing him as the Messiah, that some of his own disciples, not the 12, but his larger group of disciples were like, oh, we didn't know our rabbi thought that he was the guy, and they left. So even some of his own apprentices, not his close circle of 12, but some of them in the larger group were like, oh, and they never followed him again. They pieced out on that. So even they hadn't bought into Jesus. So they wanted, in this case, these guys to ask him about the bread. They wanted the outcome, full bellies, but they didn't want him. They wanted his power, but they didn't want to repent and believe on him. But Jesus declares it most clearly and harshly in Matthew. In Matthew chapter 11, starting in verse 20, there's a section where Jesus is very harshly scolding and uses the phrase, woe unto them, which can be viewed a few different ways, but it's a very, very harsh thing to say to someone. I'm just going to read it. Verse 20 and 21. Then began he to upbraid or scold the cities wherein most of his mighty works were done, because they repented not. Woe unto thee, Chorazin! Woe unto thee, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. So this is what he tells people that are experiencing these miracles in large portions. He's like, why aren't you repenting and believing? I've been preaching the kingdom of God. I've been preaching repentance. And I'm demonstrating the kingdom to you. I'm showing you what the kingdom is going to be like. And I'm showing you who I am through my miracles. And you're not repenting and believing. We say, what's wrong with you? If I would have done this somewhere else, they would already have repented. They would have already believed. And I'm doing it to you right here, my own people, and doing so many works and nothing. You're not repenting and believing. And so unfortunately, when you read the Gospels, the majority of people, not some, the majority of people that had followed Jesus around and saw his miracles and listened to his teachings, a majority of them wanted the miracle but didn't want the miracle worker. They wanted what he had to offer, but they didn't want him. And you see this over and over again, and that's why leading up to his death, the crowds turned against him. Because he's not who they actually wanted. You see, Jesus came with a mission and a message that should have driven people to repentance and faith, a mission and a message that should change the trajectory and direction of someone's life. Instead, people were embracing the miracle instead of the miracle worker. They had no desire for Jesus to change their ways. They just wanted his blessings as they continued in their own ways. They either did not understand or they did not care about this truth. Jesus is a person to know and to follow, not an abstract power to receive blessings from. Jesus is a person to know and to follow, not an abstract power to receive blessings from. This crowd is missing out on the point. In the next section of verses, when we see him go up to the mountain and pray, you see it really clearly once again in Luke chapter 6. He prayed all night. Next morning, he calls unto his disciples, and out of those disciples, he calls the 12. So we don't know how many that is, but he's got a larger group of disciples and apprentices or want to be disciples that are listening to his teachings. They're going to the synagogue with him. They're doing some daily life activities with him. But then he calls the 12. He calls the 12. After he calls them in this place, he calls the 12 apostles. And in Luke 6, he says that he calls them apostles, which is like his delegates, his ambassadors, his designated messengers. And he specifically designates them to, what does it say in verse 14? That they should be with him. To be with him. He was also going to send them out, but first he was calling them to be with him. Or, as someone has said, to be his constant companions. So while the idea of a disciple already is someone that's going to be around a lot and trying to emulate their master of what they're doing, the rabbi, in that, he called the 12 to be his closest and constant companions. They're going to eat together. They're going to go on trips together. They're going to sleep in the same places together. They're going to see Jesus a whole lot and interact with him a whole lot. Like more than anybody else, I'm going to take these 12 guys and pour my life into you. He was taking their apprenticeship to a whole new level. This group of disciples would have already been around Jesus a lot, but now he called the 12 to be with him, if you will, constantly. This was to be a close, personal, intimate circle. And it's within this apprenticeship that Jesus would teach them and empower them to be sent out. These ordinary men were used by God to accomplish extraordinary things, with the exception of who? There's one of these that's kind of a bad apple. Who is that? Judas. In fact, every time the Gospels list the 12 disciples, he's always listed last. That can't be on accident. It's like, oh, yeah, so-and-so and so, and then Judas. And they actually all say this as well, which also betrayed him. He's the traitor. He's the loser. It was this guy. Like, the Gospels unashamedly are like, he's last on the list, and he is a betrayer. He's a traitor. And it's easy just to think about, but understand, Judas being the traitor that he is, he was in Jesus' tightest circle. He was a part of his closest group of friends. They did life together. So that betrayal, like that's right to the core. When you say that Jesus understands because he came in the flesh and has lived a life, he was tempted like all we are, he's also experienced bitter, awful betrayal. And it's one thing when one of us gets betrayed, but you're talking about the perfect Son of God who chose him to spend time with him and betrayed him. See, because even Judas, at the front door or the back door? Okay. Because even Judas, at the moment of betraying Jesus, thought of Jesus as someone to get something from instead of someone to know and to follow. And in fact, he wasn't even going to get a miracle from him. He was going to sell him out. So just someone to use to his own selfish end, and not someone to know and to follow. So you have a large crowd that's like, let me get a miracle from him. Don't really care about his message. Don't really care about his mission. But I would love to get a miracle. And Judas, one of his closest, intimate friends individually, is like, man, I know, like, I've been around him. I know him. But I'm just going to sell him out for money. Yeah. And so, once again, you have somebody that has no interest in knowing and following him, but to get something from him. Good morning. So let's take a look at these disciples. Okay, so I already named all 12 of them here, but there's 3 guys I just want to point out that we know some about. If you do more research, and we can talk more about it later, you can see what some of them went on to do and the deaths that some of them died. Some of them died really early on. They're really early martyrs. Like James and John. James died really young. He died early as a martyr. And so we can't necessarily know what he did because he died so early. But 3 guys I want to talk about is Peter. Now, Peter is kind of the designated leader of the group of the 12, and obviously a really important person in church history, but he was someone who always put his foot in his mouth. He's always talking and always and Jesus is like, no, that's not no, Peter, that's not right. And yet, God transformed and empowered him to be a great and important leader. And how about John? So you have James and John, which they were known as what? Sons of thunder. And if you look at the Gospels, what you'll see is that they were known for being hot-tempered and quick to cast judgment. It's like, all right, yeah, Jesus, let's go get those people. I'm like, no. So Jesus is mentoring these guys that are hot-tempered. They're quick to cast judgment. He's using someone who's too quick to speak and says the wrong things at the wrong times. But what I love about John, who is known for having a quick temper, he went on to write all these different epistles in the Bible. And what was all their main theme? Love. So a guy that was hot-tempered and quick to anger, God ended up completely transforming him and empowering him to teach us what love is and what love is about. And then one more is Matthew. Matthew, the tax collector, the traitor to his own people. God used a traitor and transformed him to empower him to write the Gospel of Matthew. And so you see just a little glimpse of this core group of men that he brought around him to pour into them, to minister to them, and empower them to go on to do great things and incredible things. Jesus called this diverse group of people to himself. Have a good day. Each with their own problems and struggles. And he called them to be with him. And by being with him, he would teach them and empower them, sending them out to preach and to cast out demons with authority. So this is radically different than the crowds that gathered just to get something from Jesus. Do you see like this massive difference between a crowd that's like, man, I just want to touch him, see if I can get a quick miracle, get quick something from him, and Jesus calling this intimate group of 12 men to teach them, to do life with them constantly, to pour into them, to empower them. Has he found her? Okay. I've been distracted in sermons before. The most distracted I've probably. All right, we got this. The question is for us this morning, because we can talk about the crowds during Jesus' day. We can talk about the 12 that were right there with him. The question is, which one am I? Which follower are you and I? Am I just living my life as I see fit and then asking Jesus to bless it? It's like, Jesus, I really need your help with this. I don't really care about you, but can you really help me out with this? Or am I spending time with him so I can know him, so he can teach me and empower me to do what he's calling me to do? See the difference? The difference of the mob versus the intimate group of 12? Am I pursuing Jesus for my own selfish end, or am I pursuing Jesus because he is my life? He is my master. He is my God, and I want to know him and be known by him. Everything good? All right. We have to ask ourselves that question. Which group are we? Just needing something from Jesus? Or is he our life? And we're walking with him. I'll share something personal, I think, here in a minute at the end. So the last two verses here, you have, if you look at the other Gospels, you'll see some other things happen first. First, you have, after he calls the 12, another group is formed at this point. And they're wanting to hear some of what he has to say. So they're a little bit different than the other group. And they're also looking for miracles. And he heals several of them. And then he goes back up in the mountain and teaches the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. And then they come down and go into one of the cities. And at some point, he takes those 12 men and goes to one of their houses to have a meal with them. And this is when, once again, they are berated by a large group of people. He's like, all right, you're my 12. You're going to be my constant companions. I'm going to pour into you, minister to you. They sit down for a meal, which meals are a great way to come together and have community together. And he's sitting down there, and next thing you know, there's people pouring in through the windows and the doors. Like, okay, maybe not today. This isn't quite going as planned. But once again, the question is for you and I. In this scenario, who would you rather be? Do you want to be at the table with Jesus, personally learning from him and practicing living his ways with him right alongside of you? Or do you want to be on the outside, banging on the door, needing something from God, but not actually wanting him? No, make no mistake. We should make our requests known to God. He wants to know our needs and our wants and our desires. But there's a big difference between doing life with Jesus and just thinking of Jesus as an add-on. Big difference. Because Jesus is a person to know and to follow, not an abstract power to receive blessings from. See, many were interested in a temporary miracle, but had no interest in his message. Many were interested in overthrowing the Romans, but had no interest in the type of king that Jesus is or the type of kingdom that he preached. Many heard his message of the kingdom, but they were spiritually blind and unable to see and understand. And many wanted what Jesus could do for them, but did not want Jesus. So once again, I'm going to bring it to us. I think this is true for many people today, for many people who claim to be Christians. You see, because for many, Jesus is just a one-way ticket to heaven, a religious thing to do on the weekend, a person to pray to only when you're really desperate, or an add-on feature to whatever we've already have planned to do with our life. Missing the realization that Jesus is life. And Jesus is a person to know and to follow, not just some abstract power to receive blessings from. So may that not be true of us. But if it already is, may we repent and start being with Jesus and following Jesus. The example I'll give, and we're done, the example I'll give is even within my sermon preparation and preparing to teach. I've recently been kind of having a harder time with it than normal, and I called a good friend that was walking through that with me, trying to figure out what walls I was hitting in my preparation for teaching. And ironically, he helped me with several things. There's many reasons of some roadblocks I was hitting. But there's one thing that stuck out to me because it goes right along with what this passage is about. Which is, he asked me, how much time do you spend preparing for the teaching? And I answered his question. And then he said, how much time do you spend praying over it? And he's like, I'm not saying this is easy or that I have accomplished it, but you should be praying at least as much as you're preparing over that text. Because the difference is this, and this is where the example becomes perfect, because I don't want you to think, oh, it's that person or it's this thing or it's whatever. It can be something this simple. The difference is, all right, I'm going to write this sermon. All right, God, bless my preparation. What was that? That was me asking as if God's some abstract power to bless my work. Instead of walking with Jesus through the text in deep prayer, asking him to walk with me through the text, that I might know him more and be able to teach about him better. Not so I can have a good sermon, not so I can do a good job, but because I can know it and share it for God's glory. The difference is asking for a quick blessing versus walk with me on this. And the beautiful thing is this. Sometimes God says no to our requests, but even if he says no, if it's not just about getting a quick blessing, guess what you still have? You still have Jesus. You still have his friendship. You still have that intimate walk with him. You still have his comfort. You still have the hope that you have in him. You have all these things in Jesus. Even when he doesn't give us the miracle or the thing that we think that we really need, he doesn't leave us or forsake us. He is present with us there. And we know that because he's a person that we can know and follow, not just some power in the sky to make a request to. Yes. And so that can plague any of us. We can all fall into that trap. But I know my desire for me, my desire for us as a church is that we would be with Jesus. that we'd know Jesus, that we wouldn't just have him as an add-on or a thing, or sometimes we even have to allow Scripture to rearrange how we think things should be about culture or the way things are this or that. Sometimes we ask Jesus and God to bless a certain idea that we have without asking, is this the way it should be in the first place? But we need to walk with him so we can know what he wants. We need to walk with him to know how we're supposed to live instead of assuming we got it all figured out. Now bless what I'm doing. And so it can even trap when we have good intentions. Or we have these maybe even good ideas. But we're supposed to walk with him so he can transform us. You see, one person I didn't talk about is Simon the Zealot, okay? Probably a trained killer, would definitely be okay with taking some liberties of who he had a right to kill in order to overthrow the Roman government. For Simon the Zealot to be an apprentice of Jesus meant he had to let the other thing go. Being an apprentice to Jesus wasn't like, sweet, now I have Jesus on my side, bless my zealotness. Bless me overthrowing the Roman Empire. No. He had to surrender that, and it took him in a different direction. Matthew had to give up tax collecting because he was wrong to betray his own people. And he had to surrender that. He didn't say, all right, God, bless my tax collecting. No, it changed his direction. He had to leave that behind to be with Jesus and walk a new direction instead. So instead of us looking at God as just a way to bless what we want and what we think, it's a relationship. He's someone that we know and follow and be with, who transforms us and empowers us and can take a fool like me and be like, but I'm going to empower you to do something that's contrary to your own personality and your own flesh. Like John, the quick-tempered, angry guy who God's going to use to teach us about love. That's what God does. He didn't say, I'm hot-tempered, God bless my hot-temperedness. So it can apply to anything. This principle applies to everything. It's not just some asking for a big miracle. It's even the small things that it applies to in our life. Because he's someone to know. He's someone to follow. I want to be at the table with Jesus. I don't want to be the crowd trying to break in, just trying to get a temporary blessing. I want to be with Jesus and trust him with the outcome and know that he is good and right.